If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. And if you're enjoying these stories, there's a link below to buy me a cup of coffee. This is the Chassidic Story Project with Barak Hullman, podcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. This podcast is sponsored by listeners just like you. To become a supporter of this podcast, please go to HasidicStory.com, HASIDIC story.com. You'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know. Shalom Aleichem, my sweetest friends. I hope you had a beautiful Shavuot. And now we're heading into the summer months, which eventually is leading to Rosh Hashanah. So if you haven't started to do tshuva yet, now is a good time to start. I have 2 stories for you this week, but before I begin, I want to dedicate this episode to the continued success of our soldiers in battle, wherever they are, the returning of all the hostages, safe, healthy, and complete, the refuah shlema, the full recovery of everyone who's been injured or is ill, the comforting of those that lost loved ones, and the continued unity of the Jewish people here in the land of Israel and all around the world, Be'ezat Hashem. Around 450 years ago, there was a wealthy Jew living in Poland whose name was Avremel. And despite his wealth, he wasn't able to find an appropriate match for his daughter. He had, of course, gone to all the shadchanim and all the shadchaniot, and every time they brought something in front of him, either the girl herself or the parents didn't approve of the match. And it was quite surprising because, besides being a wealthy family, she was also very beautiful and charming and intelligent. But no matter where they looked, they couldn't seem to find the right match for her. And then after quite some time looking for the right match, there was a proposal that came from one of the strangest places, from Egypt. In the Egyptian community, there was a great young Torah scholar who had excellent character traits, was kind and smiled, and everyone loved. And through Hashem's hand, he had eventually made his way to Poland. And when he showed up and the matchmakers got to know him, the first person that they suggested was Avremel's daughter. And of course, the young man was promised a huge dowry, a great deal of money to get them started in life. And they agreed that the wedding would take place in Egypt. And so the whole family packed up and went to Egypt, where this young man was from. Having so much wealth and the European money went very far in Egypt in those days, and so it was a very grand and beautiful and luxurious wedding with a huge crowd of family and friends and distinguished guests, and also from the bride's family. There were entire boats that came over from Poland to Egypt to celebrate this wedding. And of course, after the wedding, there's the 7 days of formal celebration, the Sheva Brachot, where all the relatives of the family came every night and had a meal, and in a sense continued the wedding for an entire week. And when the week of the Sheva Brachot was over, all of the relatives of the bride returned back to Poland, and she and her new husband remained in Egypt with the large dowry that Avremel had given them. And only a few months after they got married, a terrible thing happened. Avremel's daughter, the young bride, she passed away in her sleep. No one knew why. And of course, her new husband and his parents were shocked and heartbroken. And she was buried in Egypt. And every day he would go and visit his wife's grave and cry heart-piercing sobs that not just pierced the hearts of the people in the Jewish community in Egypt, but even the highest places in heaven. And several weeks later, this young widower received a shocking letter. It was a letter from his late wife's father, Avremel. In the letter, Avremel demanded that this young widower return the dowry, return the payment that was given to help the young couple get started in life. He based it on a claim from Rabbeinu Tam, who of course everybody knows was the grandson of Rashi. He ruled in the 12th century that a husband does not inherit anything from his wife if she passes away during the first year of marriage. And there were many other great rabbis and authorities that endorsed this ruling, and it had been accepted in most Jewish communities. And this is what Avremel put in the letter, that he wanted the money back. This poor husband, he was already heartbroken over his wife passing away, and now his father-in-law wants all the money back for marrying his daughter? So being a Torah scholar, he started looking into the matter, and he learned that in the lands of the Ashkenazim, the European Jews, this was indeed the halacha, this was the case. However, in the communities in the Muslim world, amongst the Sfardim, this was not the case. And so he wrote back to his father-in-law and said, since I'm from Egypt, the wedding took place in Egypt, I'm under no obligation whatsoever to return the money. It was given to me in order to marry your daughter. I married your daughter, and I'm heartbroken over her death, and I will not return the money. An interesting situation. Here you have two Jewish communities, as they say, two Jews and three opinions. In this case, two Jewish communities and two opinions. And so, the young widower sent the letter back to his father-in-law in Poland, and it wasn't long before he got a letter back. And in the return letter, Avremel said, there's an opinion that the judgment should not be based on who the husband is or where the wedding was, but where the source of the money came from and not its final location. And from that letter, Avremel did not receive a response because his son-in-law had already gave him his answer and he didn't want to argue. And so Avremel realized he had no choice but to travel to Egypt and to get his money back. If he had to, he would take his son-in-law to a Beit Din and have the Beit Din, the religious court, return his money. But before he left, he wanted to make sure that he had letters from some of the greatest rabbinical authorities in Poland. And so he had them put down in writing their opinion that the money had to be returned. And one of these rabbis who wrote an opinion for Avremel was Rabbi Shlomo Luria of Lublin, known as the Maharshal. So after a long journey, Rabbi Avremel finally arrived in Egypt. And the first place he went was to the grave of his daughter. And after that, he went to deal with his financial problem. He started by arranging meetings with the top rabbinical judges in Egypt. And he explained to them the situation, and he showed them the letters from all of the great rabbis in Poland that he had collected before he came over. And Avremel was very impressed with the rabbis who had written the letters for him, but the rabbis in Egypt were not. They looked at this decision from Rabbeinu Tam from the 12th century, and they said, it's not binding for us here in Egypt. There were also great rabbis in Egypt, such as the Radbaz, and of course the Arizal. And one of these sages in Egypt, whose name was Rabbi Mansour, he felt the pain of Rabbi Avremel, and he tried to comfort him. He said, there's a very special Jew. It's a very special rabbi, very holy person, whose name is Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, known as the Ari. And until recently, he lived here amongst us in Egypt, but now he lives in the Holy Land. And even though his mother's family is from Egypt, his father was from Europe, and he signs his letters the Ashkenazi and follows the customs of Ashkenazim. So considering he grew up in Egypt, his mother is Egyptian, but he sees himself as Ashkenazi. He's a great rabbi and a holy person. This Rabbi Mansour said to Rabbi Avremel, go to Sfat and ask his advice. And so Rabbi Avremel set out for the Holy Land and went all the way up to Sfat. And he found the modest home of the Holy Ari and asked for a one-on-one meeting with him. And when his time came, he sat in front of the great rabbi and told him the tragic story of his daughter and all the details of the argument over the dowry. And he even showed him all the letters that he brought with him from Europe, from all the great rabbis. And the Holy Ari, he looked for a long time at Avremel. He had eyes that hugged Avremel with love and kindness. And then he said to Avremel, I've looked into the heavens and I've looked into your soul, and my advice is to give up your claim on the money. Now, Avremel did not expect this, because this was an Ashkenazi rabbi who followed the customs of the Ashkenazim. And here he had all these letters from the great rabbis of Ashkenaz, meaning Europe, saying that he was right and it was a lot of money. And he didn't want his son-in-law to have it, because he wasn't really a son-in-law anymore. And so he says to the Ari, I don't understand. Everything says that money belongs to me. And now the Ari turned very serious. He said, if you want to know the reason for my verdict, you may say in my name that it's written in our holy Torah in Exodus 21:24, where it says, Ayin tachat ayin, shein tachat shein, yad tachat yad, regel tachat regel. Meaning an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, and a foot for a foot. That was the Ari's explanation for his judgment. And word of the Ari's judgment spread throughout all of Egypt and across the ocean to Europe. And when the Maharshal, who was the great uncle of the Ari, the other great sages of Poland, who had written these letters supporting returning the dowry, heard of the judgment from the Ari, they were astounded and they were outraged. Now there was a rabbinical storm going from one continent to another. And eventually, the Ari gathered his closest students to explain the meaning of his words, and he explained it with a story. He said many decades ago, there were two wealthy merchants that went on a ship to buy merchandise at a distant fair, and they were very good friends, as well as business partners. But before they even got off the ship, one of them realized that his wallet with all of his money, a huge amount of money, was stolen, and he had nothing left for buying at the fair or for running his business. And his friend, the business partner, he of course didn't abandon him. He offered to lend him half of his money. He said, use it for business, and you can make a profit. By the time you get back, you can pay me back. But the loan was never repaid. It was taken, but never repaid. The two men moved to different places, and they never saw each other again. And after many years, the business partner that lent half of his money passed away. And a short time later, the one that borrowed the money also passed away. And their souls were brought before the heavenly court, and the court was discussing the matter of the loan between them. Since the loan could not be repaid because they were no longer this world, the court decided that the two souls would have to come back into this world and complete their financial transaction. The soul of the lender became the person who eventually was the young husband from Egypt, and the soul of the borrower was his bride. And Hashem arranged it so that the girl from Poland would marry the boy from Egypt in order so that the money would be returned to its rightful owner. And as soon as that happened, the soul of the Kala, of the bride, no longer needed to be in this world. And so she was sent back up to heaven. And so the Ari said, this is how Hashem paid back. An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, and a foot for a foot. Of course, we don't believe in actually paying back by taking a person's eye or tooth. Chas v'shalom. We believe in the financial equivalent of such a thing. And here, the money that was borrowed had to be returned, and it was returned in a way arranged from heaven. And when Rebbe Vremel heard the answer of the Ari, he understood why he had told him to give up his claim to the money. Because had he insisted on taking the money, the secrets of reincarnation, the judgments of heaven, would not have come about as Hashem desired, and these souls would have had to come back into this world again in order to fix what had not yet been rectified. And so, my friends, everybody has a tikkun, many tikkunim, many things that we need to fix in this world. And sometimes things happen to us and it feels like it's an injustice. We lose something of value. We miss an opportunity. We make poor decisions and get upset at ourselves for it. But really everything is Hashem helping us fix things so that when we get to the world to come, we'll be able to rejoice and bask in Hashem's light. And so, whenever you're suffering or having a hard time, just remind yourself that it's a tikkun, it's a fixing for something. And from that you can be joyous that Hashem cared enough to bring about the tikkun in this world rather than in the world to come.
Hi, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Halalai, lai, 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 ma, lili, lai, 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 halalai, lai, lai, lili, lai, 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 lili, lai.
I have another story for you. This is a story that took place probably around 100 years ago in the neighborhood of Shari Chesed when there was still a milkman whose name was Yechezkel. And Yechezkel was a scholar. Like many people, he knew the Talmud and he knew the commentaries. And when he would be delivering the milk, he would be reciting words of Mishnah by heart. Every day he would work just enough to provide for his family, and then he would go to the Beit Midrash, the study hall, and spend the rest of the hours of the day and much of the evening learning Torah. One morning, one of the scholars comes out of the Beit Midrash, and he sees Yechezkel standing in the middle of an alley holding a large bag. It appeared that Yechezkel was confused and didn't even notice that the scholar was approaching him, till the scholar says to him, Yechezkel, what's that bag you got there? And he says, I just found a bag filled with money. It's a big bag, filled with lots of coins. The scholar feels the bag and he says, indeed, this is a lot of money. And the first thought that the scholar had was that Yechezkel gets to keep the money because these were unmarked coins and there was nothing to identify the bag. No name, no tag, Not even a special color? But Yechezkel was not excited about this at all. All he could think about is Hashavat Eveda, returning a lost object to its owner. He says to the scholar, if a person returns a sum of money, does it count as one mitzvah? Or is there an additional mitzvah for every coin that's returned? And if it's a mitzvah for every coin that's returned, then I have a great opportunity right now to accumulate many mitzvot. The two of them decided to leave the alleyway and go into a corner of the Beit Midrash and figure out what they were going to do. They decided they would count the money because if somebody's going to come and claim the money, they would have to say the exact amount in order for them to know that that was the owner. And as they counted and counted, they realized that it was really quite a lot of money. The scholar says to Yechezkel, who says that you're even obligated to return the money. We don't have any uniquely identifying signs, not on the coins, not in the bag. And halacha says that if a person finds it and there's nothing that can identify it belonging to anyone specific, you're allowed to keep it. But Yechezkel, he wanted to find some identifying sign on the bag because he didn't want to keep the money. And the scholar didn't understand. He said the halacha is clear. Yechezkel, you can keep the money. And how nice. You'll have a lot of money. We just counted a few thousand coins, Yechezkel said. And if there's no obligation for me to return the money, then I just missed my opportunity to get thousands of mitzvot. And the scholar said, we believe that whatever Hashem does is for the good. And if you're not obligated to return the money, maybe this is Hashem telling you that you don't have to deliver milk anymore. You can sit and learn Torah all day long and not have to worry about supporting your family. And Yechezkel said, what are you talking about? Chas v'shalom. Even if I didn't have to return the money to its owner, there's no way that I could just sit at home and enjoy somebody else's fortune while there's somebody crying over the money that he lost. This is a lot of money. I'm fine anyhow. I have bread and salt and milk, and I have everything I need. And the scholar said, would it be so bad if you had another piece of bread and maybe some butter to go along with your milk? But Yechezkel said, our sages teach us one should pray that Torah and not food or delicacies goes into his stomach. The scholar says, butter is not a delicacy like it was in the past. You should keep the money. And Yechezkel said, okay, you might be true that butter is not a delicacy like in the past, but how will that butter taste if I bought it knowing that somebody else is crying over their money that they lost? The scholar realized he wasn't going to convince Yechezkel to keep the money. And so they continued searching the bag, and eventually, within the seam, they saw there was a little piece of paper. And in that paper was the name of the person that it belonged to. Now Yechezkel was so happy. His face had turned white, but now the color came back into his face. The two of them went to return the money to its rightful owner. And when he saw Yechezkel holding the bag, he kissed him and hugged him and thanked him. And he said, Yechezkel, where did you find it? He said, it was sitting in the alley. We had a whole debate over whether I was allowed to keep the money or not, because we couldn't find any identifying sign. But I insisted that even if I was allowed to keep the money, I had to find the person it belonged to, because I could get no peace of mind using money that I know that somebody lost. He said to the person that he returned the money to, today you got your fortune back, and I got thousands of mitzvot from one bag that I found in the street. And when word spread that Yechezkel the milkman returned an absolute fortune that many people would have kept, everyone made sure to buy their milk from Yechezkel, and many people gave him an extra tip as well, and said, Yechezkel, please buy yourself an extra slice of bread and a little butter so that when you learn Torah, you'll have a little bit of extra energy. And it's not the food that will be entering your stomach, but the Torah that you learn for all of our sake. Thank you so much for listening, my sweetest friends. As always, thank you to all the people that sent in cups of coffee. And I also want to thank the Green family of Seattle, Washington, and specifically their sons, Moishi, Charles, and Will, and of course to their mother who was in touch with me. Thank you for your support and for listening to the podcast. And thank you to all of the listeners. Please keep on sharing and commenting. And if you'd like to become a financial supporter of this podcast, you can do so by going to my website. There's a link in the description, ChassidicStory.com. There's many ways of sending in a contribution, a one-time contribution, monthly, yearly, whatever you like. All contributions are greatly appreciated. So thank you again. I hope you have a beautiful Shabbos, my friends. And until next week, sei gesund. Take care of yourselves.